Today's episode is perfect for those within the military and first responder community, including spouses. We're going over different resources, the healing process, post-traumatic growth, and really just life in general and doing the work to have a better future for yourself. So without further ado, let's dive into today's episode. So today I have Kris Searles with me. He is a husband, father of twins, Army and SAR veteran, and is now a trauma-informed coach working with veterans in the Veteran Talking to Veterans program in Wyoming and across the Rocky Mountain West. And also the ambassador for the Marcus Institute of Brain Health. So thank you so much for joining me today and for helping out veterans as a veteran.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's nice.
Yes. So tell me a little bit about, like, first your background with, the military, just like an overview of your story.
I'm that typical vet that wanted to join after 9/11. I'm fourth generation military, so my grandfather was a Utah Beach first wave combat engineer, and then 5 days later captured by the Germans and spent 10 months POW camp. And then he was done after that. And then my uncle, his son, was Air Force air traffic control. And then my dad was a Green Beret in the Vietnam time frame. Never deployed, thankfully, trained. And then I always wanted to join the military. Finally, after 9/11, I got the courage to do it. And went in the infantry, 4th Infantry Division at Fort Carson. We deployed to Iraq a year later for the invasion. That was a hell of an experience. And then came back from that and re-enlisted shortly after. Got a chance to go to sniper school, did that, and then we built a sniper platoon from scratch because the Army realized that they need a lot of snipers. So we built a platoon from scratch and then redeployed again in 2006. That was a pretty wild ride. That was definitely what war is all about. It had everything, but lots of contacts, lots of ambushes, IEDs, firefights, kicking in doors, sniper operations, all that stuff. Started taking a lot of casualties in our area. Guys started getting injured. So kind of to bring this to a close, and I got to serve with some exceptional men and women in both of those deployments. They were just great guys. When I went through sniper school, I went through with an Olympian, Lawrence Amar. He was the 96 Olympic field hockey team captain. Just an exceptional man. This guy was something. I remember asking him, why are you in the military after doing all this Olympic stuff? He's like, I wanted to give back to my country. That gave me so much. And I was like, wow. We lost him a few years ago to a heart condition. Great guy. He was one of the ones that was injured and sent home early. So we were quite undermanned. We were getting ready to wrap up the deployment, and we got tasked with escorting our battalion's convoy of equipment to, I think, Balad Air Base. We only had 4 trucks, a few guys per truck, 3-4 guys per truck. And we were going home. Our guys started going home the next day. So they turned in their weapons, advanced weapons and armor and stuff. And so they're like, we'll go with you on this last run. And so they grabbed a few magazines, threw on their body armor, and jumped in the trucks just to go do a quick escort. On the way back, that truck got hit with an EFP and killed 3 of the 4 guys in the truck. And that was my entire team. I was gunning on a different truck. So I lost 3 of my 4 guys. The one guy that lived was pretty torn up, but so he got medevaced out. He's doing good today. But so those guys were going home the next day. I was going home a few days after that. So I went from like in war, fighting combat stuff, to now I'm home and there's these 3 families with cameras in my face. What happened to my son? What's going on? What happened? No. They want to hear all the stories, and they're all great people. The 3 guys were awesome. It was Ryan Hopt, Norman Taylor, and Nathan Frigo. Just great young men starting their lives. The usual Iraq story, but great guys, and the families were great. So we did the memorial for them. That was rough, and then after that, I started having a lot of anger issues, like lots of serious anger problems. I started having a lot of back problems too, even before that deployment. So eventually I started kind of getting med boarded out. They realized I was done physically, knees, shoulders, back, all that stuff from the infantry combat world. And I was still doing a lot of anger problems. Like I was an assistant sniper instructor for a short time, and I came to the point I couldn't be around the students because I get so angry. And then anger management classes, that didn't do anything. Then I got out and I went to work for range control at Fort Carson downrange, building ranges and training soldiers, and another great job with great people. But I was yelling at soldiers. Like I'd be in the tower, the towers at the ranges. I'd be in the tower yelling at soldiers and stuff like I was some hotshot. So then my wife started to realize what was going on, and we were coming up to Wyoming every 4th of July for 3 years in a row. 2008, 9, and 10, I think it was. 9, 10, and 11. And that third time we came up, she was like, we're moving. We're done. And we're getting out of the city. You're done. We're done. Let's get out of here. So we moved up here, which was a great call. But I didn't have anybody to really relate to. Which, where I am in Wyoming, there's only a couple thousand people and not a lot of veterans. So I was still kind of isolated and alone, couldn't really talk. And then we decided just to build our own house. So that was her way of keeping me busy, keeping my hands busy, keeping my mind busy, keeping me just kind of moving forward. So we built our own house. We did everything. We have 10 acres. We did everything here except dig the well. But we did everything else, just the two of us, which was great. Then a couple of years into living here, I joined Search and Rescue, went on to become their Swiftwater instructor and team leader, ice rescue instructor, team leader. I did a lot of helicopter short haul operations, a lot of high angle rope rescue operations, tons of training there. Avalanche, snowmobile, ATV, tons of medical stuff. Great job. Another one. Great. All volunteers. Exceptional men and women. But we did some pretty high level elite stuff, like jumping into class 3 rapids and rivers to rescue people, hanging from a helicopter. So we put a 150-foot rope fixed to the helicopter, and then they would pick us up and we would hang from that rope and they would put us into the mountains that, climbers that were injured or bodies that we had to recover or, whatever. Flying through the Wind River Range at 13,000 feet hanging from a helicopter was pretty freaking awesome. That's what I mean by elite level stuff. A lot of glacier rescues and recoveries. But same thing, towards that 8, 9 years into that, I started getting angry and yelling at people and flipping out because the lack of accountability. People don't take responsibility for themselves and their actions and stuff. And I just couldn't handle that. Like we were just talking about, coming from the military, if you're going to do something, do it.
Yes.
Don't show up drunk to a rescue or a training.
Yeah.
So I ended up having to leave there because I snapped on a couple people, pretty serious anger problems. And then about that time, my twins came. That was 2018. And a couple of years into that, I was like, man, I'm not as good a dad as I could be for these guys. My wife was bringing a lot of stress home from work, and that wasn't good, which caused me to flare up more. So a good friend of mine, who in 2003 in Iraq got hit with a 500-pound bomb IED he was in the back of the Bradley, and it went off in the front of the Bradley, so that close. And he was never the same again. Migraines, weekly, daily headaches, never quite the same. So finally, 20 years later, to the month almost, he went away to the Marcus Institute for Brain Health. And I was so happy for him that he's finally doing something for himself. He took care of his family first. Everybody else had to be taken care of before taking care of himself, which is what we veterans do. And so I called him after he was gone for almost a month. I was like, hey man, how did it go? Tell me how you doing? How you feeling? How's things? And as he's telling me this, I'm just like, damn, I need to go to this. And that was kind of the awakening. I was already kind of on that journey of, man, I got to start finding something here. So this is not right. I got to do something. It's like you hit that early 40s mark and your mind starts shifting and changing from taking care of everybody else first. And I got to start thinking about yourself. And he's like, look, man, I can't force you to do this, but I highly recommend you sign up for this. And I literally got off the phone and I just we're sitting here now. I got off the phone and I just went on my laptop and started filling out the application. And I didn't want to give myself any time to talk myself out of it.
Yeah.
Justify why I'm good. When I was getting med boarded out, I had to talk to the therapist and everything. And the therapist was like, look, man, he actually stood up, shook my hand. He's like, well, I really appreciate you being honest. Most people come here and lie to try to get PTSD stuff. He goes, I think you're doing good. You got some anger issues, but you'll be fine. I don't think you have any trauma. I was like, all right, cool. Thanks, man. And I wore that like a badge of honor. I'm good. I don't need anything.
Yes. That
was my justification as to why I didn't, think I needed any work on myself. So I signed up. This institute moves very fast. Within an hour, I had an email back saying, hey, let's schedule a phone call. The next day, I had an hour-long interview, which took 20 minutes for them to say, yeah, you need to come in. So they take that to their board, their panel of neuropsychologists, neuroscientists, physical therapists, art therapy, behavioral health, speech and language, everything in between. And that panel says, yes, let's bring them in, or no, what advise them to do this instead. So they brought me in for a 3 or 4 day evaluation, which is pretty in depth. They do everything. It's the whole body at once. They focus on PTS and TBI, not just one or the other, and everything that goes with it. So full body check over for 3 days, 4 days, and then they invited me back. Went back a few months later, and you live there for 3 weeks. So 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, you were just getting physically, emotionally, and mentally just smoked.
Yeah.
1 hour in this session, 1 hour that session, 1 hour the next session, and you're with your group of buddies, 4 or 5 of you to go through this at once. Half the time it's group stuff, half the time it's alone, and you're just kind of bouncing through this through the days. Might go from physical therapy to art therapy to nutrition class to yoga. You're just all around. It was awesome. So I came out of that feeling like $1,000,000. I was ready to take on the world. Shortly after, a few months later, this would have been early 2024. Yeah, last year. This thing popped up about this Veterans Talking to Veterans program, this coaching thing, and I'm like, sure, I'll go help other vets. I don't know what this is, but I'm a different person now. I'll go help other people. So I signed up, and they brought me on, and this program started from the fall of Afghanistan. As everybody's heard, vets are pretty freaking upset about that time.
Yes.
The suicide hotlines went through the roof. The anger went through the roof. And so Mark Gordon, the governor of Wyoming, was already doing a lot for mental health in Wyoming. And Julie Elledge, the woman that founded Veterans Talking to Veterans, she's a master coach, licensed clinical therapist, PhD educator, has a business where she trains coaches. She's also therapy, all of the above. Just a brilliant mind getting after it. And she cold calls the VA commissioner for Wyoming that morning in Afghanistan and it's like, hey, look, we got a problem. Your veterans are pissed. They're calling me. My clients are calling me upset. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have any phone calls. I haven't heard anything. That was 8 o'clock in the morning. By noon that day, Tim Shepard, the VA commissioner, calls Julie back and says, holy shit, we got a problem. My phone hasn't stopped ringing since you called. Like, this is not good. What can we do? She's like, I don't know. I'm not a vet. I don't know. She's like, well, I need your help. What can we do? You're a therapist. Help me out here. She's like, well, I've always thought that our veterans are what could heal our communities. They're natural givers, helpers. That's what they do. If we train them to be coaches, which is not hard to do, we can put them to work helping their veterans, their community, and they'll go into their communities, their towns, and get to work helping their people. So that's what they did. Mark Gordon, the governor, found the money and got grants applied, and Julie and her family, the Mentor Agility business, went to work training vets to be coaches, and they just figured it out. Just went to work. And so all it is you do a quick 40 hours online self-paced training and then a 40-hour 9 to 5 Monday to Friday training on Zoom, and they just put you out there. They just get you to work. And so what we're doing is we take our coaching skills and we hold weekly meetings like every once a week for an hour and a half. And here in my small town, I have 4 or 5, 6 guys that come in, but I have like 10 to 15 that Zoom in from around the country. And this network is just exploding. Wyoming, we're getting ready to train our next block of coaches now, which will pretty much cover the state. We'll have about 50 to 60 coaches across the state. We did one around Idaho. We got like 15 in Idaho. We're getting ready to start New Mexico soon. I think Arizona's looking at it. New York's looking at it. Colorado's taking it on. So this is just exploding. And it's so easy. It's so cool because all we do is the coach starts the meeting off and with reading like a mythological tale. You ever done that? Have you done this kind of work?
No, I haven't. No.
So are you familiar with Joseph Campbell, his work?
I don't think so. Not yet.
So it's the hero's journey methodology.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Jordan Peterson follows it.
Yeah.
Carl Jung. It's, Jung, Joseph Campbell, now Jordan Peterson. You get the timeline of the guys that are running it. So all it is storytelling. We all have a story to tell. We all live a story. And so that's what we do is we tap into that part of the mind and just get that story going. So we read these mythological tales that are centuries old. Kings and queens, warriors, whatever. And we talk about morals, values, relationships, addiction, everyday life stuff This is part of life. But because they're mythological tales, it doesn't trigger anybody's personal story, personal response. And the coach asks a question after that story, read a paragraph or two of the story. And the questions are designed to start the conversation going. And a good session, a good meeting, you only ask 2 or 3 questions in an hour and a half because the conversation just takes off. Like my meeting last Wednesday, I didn't even ask a single question. I read the story and people just started talking. And I literally put the questions down and for an hour and a half didn't really do anything. And so it's so cool to watch this work. So what happens is somebody will kind of, I feel like this is about this. This is what the story is trying to say. Somebody else will be like, oh yeah, I was thinking this. And then eventually it'll be, yeah, that reminds me of this time where I did this or I experienced this. And someone that might, it's just at that point they need to talk. They have to get it out. That person gets it out. But because they're amongst their peers, they're amongst veterans, first responders, we've all been through similar things, they feel comfortable enough opening up. And what happens is, because of that, when they open that up, other members of the group say, yeah, man, I know where you're coming from. I've been there. And so you see the support happen. And that person now realizes they're not alone. They have other people they can relate to. They're going through the fight together. And you watch this happen throughout the meeting. Someone opens up and is vulnerable. Everybody else surrounds and supports that person. And then 20 minutes later, somebody else opens up about something that was being vulnerable. And that guy that opened up earlier is now supporting that person. So it's a give and take. Everybody's helping each other and everybody wins. But nobody was triggered, upset, angry from that.
Not like this forced counseling session where you're like, tell me more about that. Like, can you expand on that? You're like, oh no.
Exactly. If they want to go that way, they can. And we're there to support them. And so everybody comes in like, okay, fine, I'll come to your therapy session or your group talk thing, whatever. I call my buddies first. Hey man, come help me with this new thing I'm doing. And now they're like, oh, this is nothing. This is just, we're just hanging out, shooting the shit. It's really all it is. But you get these deep life lessons, like experience from everybody. You get so much wisdom from the group. Like we have Vietnam guys that come and talk, and it's like, wow, or guys that were at the Berlin Wall when the wall fell. I mean, that's history. So you get a history lesson on top of this life experience. So it's really awesome, and it's very rewarding for everybody because everybody walks away feeling like they got to help each other, which is what it was designed to do. Get out there and let each other go to work. And so I'm about 9 months into doing this group meeting thing. And I help coach kids in high school that are trying to quit smoking and vaping. And that's working. And those kids start to open up to me about stuff. I give them an avenue. And it's someone they could talk to that they don't normally get to talk to. We've had some tragedies in our small town where one of our jail deputies took his own life last year. The coaches from across the state were able to come together and help the community and kind of progress through that and just to help. We had a recent crazy murder in one of our other small towns. Long story, but we're here to help. Like they know they can reach out to us if the schools need us, if the teachers need us. We're here for them. And this is all free. There's no charge to this. And like I mentioned earlier, before you hit record, we had that tragedy where the mother shot and killed her 4 babies and then killed herself. And that was like maybe 500 people in this town. So they have no assets for this type of thing. And the whole town is affected. Fortunately, in that community, around that community, not too far from Cody, Wyoming, there's been a lot of work like this being done for the last 5 or 6 years. So this form of, just camaraderie, vets and first responders coming together weekly has been going on for a while. They already know that they're already doing the work, the mental health work. So they're very proactive. And that afternoon after this happened, we have 2 coaches there in that community. They were there working with the first responders that were on scene dealing with this terrible thing. They were pulling babies out of cribs that were shot.
Yeah.
Pretty terrible. That stuff doesn't go away. And now they're working with the doctors that were in the clinic in the hospital that saw this. They're working with the teachers that were part of the school that these kids were going to. The governor was there speaking yesterday about the situation. And then I think in a couple of weeks, Veterans Talking to Veterans will condense onto that community to help them. And just like I said, it gives us purpose. It gives the vets purpose. We get to go help. The community now gets to interact more with veterans, which I think is huge. I don't think enough of us are telling our stories.
You know,
I, for multiple reasons, I think that needs to be done. One, they need to hear what goes on. But two, I think they need to hear, because who is it that can stop these stupid wars from happening? It's the public. The public, when they start to hear the tragedies that are going on and the traumas that we're all carrying, maybe they'll speak up more about, no, we're not going to fund these stupid wars. We don't want you going overseas to whatever country we've never heard of before to go fight something we don't have nothing to do with.
yes.
So it's kind of why I want to get vets talking more, is so people can hear what they're dealing with and why this needs to stop. This stupid wars need to stop.
Yes.
So yeah, that's the Veterans Talking to Veterans program. And if you want, I can I'll give you a contact to my meeting or other friends' meetings, and if anybody you're listening wants to check it out. I mean, think of this meeting as like an interactive podcast where everybody's speaking, a give and a take conversation. I'm doing all the talking here, but usually the whole group is doing this. Everybody is talking in the group, and then little subgroups have started from the VTV thing. So
Yeah.
my friend Nadia, she was in the Marines for a short time, 5 years as a patrol deputy in Jackson, Wyoming, and then outside of there, and then whole family is military. Her husband is currently in training right now for the Army, and she's got 2 kids under 2. So I mean, I'm sure that sounds familiar to you.
Yeah.
And she holds women's meetings, women vet meetings, and spouses, just for the women to get together,
Yeah.
because only you guys know what you guys went through. I
Yeah.
can't relate to your story like you guys can.
Yeah.
When you're a mom and a soldier, and maybe your spouse is a soldier, that's a lot. That's a lot. It's many hats you're wearing. I have a friend who she was a Kiowa pilot, and she probably has more confirmed kills than I do, flying around and I have a lot of respect for those women that did that, because they helped me many times.
Yeah.
And now she's a homeschool mom.
Yep.
So there's this badass Kiowa pilot. It's not a homeschool mom. I'm like, man, that is a story right there. You got to write a book or something. And I have another friend. She was a Black Hawk first air assault pilot, while her husband was a medevac pilot.
Yeah.
So then I think they had a baby, and then she's like, "Okay, I'm done. I'll go be the mom. You keep doing your Army thing." And so I mean, she had, how many hats was she wearing for a while? And so now she's got a great nonprofit. It's called the Alongside Project. She takes women vets out into nature and just goes on mountain biking trips, skiing, adventuring, and just gets them outside, disconnected from the families, disconnected from the technology. And then someone like me, a coach like me, goes along with them, and just those evenings around the campfire and just gets them talking.
I love that.
And gets those stories going, the storytelling thing.
And I like a lot, like I know you mentioned like first responders and stuff like that. I like that more organizations are realizing how alike our circumstances are. And I know I was originally going through a military and first responder psychology degree program, but it went to teach out and there was going to be a whole bunch of like ordeals going on. But I loved that class, like that program so much. It was like another master's program because it helped me open my eyes. Like I knew, I know people who are in the police force or firefighters and things like that, but it wasn't until I was reading it from like a psychological like brain working on my papers, I was like, no, like if anything, like any trauma they experience is almost worse because veterans get to come home. They don't have to like go past that corner again or go past that building again. And just like the different things that like I think veterans or everyone's like, oh, veterans and mental health, but I'm glad to see more people like, oh no, our first responders really need this too. And like being able to bring us together because even if it's not the same, it's the same. And so even like I've said it, even like for me, I didn't really experience like war. Like I went to Bagram, but not really. And so but I still, just because I joined the military, it was like enough for like, and I think because I was a medic, but like I would just be sitting there like having drinks with the guys like back in the Army days. I'm like, I don't know what it is. They're like, I had to go to therapy for like months, and like I just spilled all of that to you, like just because I was like, it's because I'm in the military, like I'm a veteran, And so it's just like fascinating to get to see like all the different ways that like veterans are able to share their story. And I think a lot of it too comes down to like, I know that you joined. So like there's like this level of like lack, like I think there can be uncertainty or shame, maybe not shame. I don't want to say shame, but like I don't know what this person who didn't even sign up for the military will think about my experience before you even share about the trauma of it. It's just like just you telling that story alone, you're like, well, what are they going to think about me as a person, you know, because I did this thing, but they weren't there. So like they don't know what I was experiencing. So getting to have that conversation with veterans, I think is so huge.
Yeah, I mean, just you being a combat medic, I know that you've at least been trained. I don't know what exposure you had, but at least you've been trained and known that you are fully prepared to stick your thumb in a bleeding hole
Yeah.
to stop the bleeding or to wrench down on a tourniquet or whatever it is you got to do. And that says something about you. That's just
I
like an
still
all just said.
follow people on it. I was like, I don't need this, but maybe I will. Who knows? Something could happen one day. And
Oh no, you're 100% correct. I keep up all my medical training from search and rescue just because you never know. I guess I should have mentioned I have a nonprofit I started
yes.
a couple of years ago. It involves long range shooting and shooting stuff in general. A lot of my buddies wanted me to teach them long range shooting. I was like, okay, fine, but you're gonna pay, but I don't want your money, but I want your donation money so I can go help other people.
Yeah.
I put on shooting events, and the fee that I charge is a donation that goes towards um, vets and first responders' physical and now mental health. At first, I'm a big believer in stem cell therapy. I did stem cell injections in my spine. Like I was 18, I think I did that. I was pretty bad. I could hardly stand up anymore. So I did injections in my 3 lumbar discs to try to, have a life again, and it's a huge, life changing thing. So I saw what it did for me, and then all my buddies I came in the same time I did hit that 20-year mark now, and they're retiring and they're wrecked. Their bodies are just wrecked. I was like, well, hey, I can raise money and get them some stem, like inject their knees and their shoulders and try to help them out. So that was my thought. Well, how can I raise money? Well, people want me to teach them how to shoot. Well, here, pay me to teach and I'll help fund.
I love
I mean, I haven't raised enough money yet to do anything, but I'm just now starting to. And part of that journey is talking about the mental health journey. I started that nonprofit before I went to Marcus Institute, just before. I was not ready yet to go out and talk to people about my story or why I want to raise money and why this needs to happen. I couldn't talk to really anybody. I was very isolated before I went off. I mean, I was literally working alone, finishing houses by myself in a brand new home, just doing finished trim. Like I needed to be alone. I was so angry. I couldn't talk to anybody. So now that I've kind of cleared all the cobwebs out of my head and I've been able to speak more openly and communicate better, I now realize I'm not going out and asking people for money. I'm asking people for money to help somebody else. It's not for me. I'm trying to help these people. And as I've gotten more involved with the mental health side of things, like we were talking about earlier, so in the global war on terror, we lost 7,057 soldiers, military. Since then, in that same block of time since 9/11, we've lost over 50,000 veterans to suicide from that generation, and I put this in the promotional thing I'm doing for a fundraiser. The enemy is now in every community. They're here. They've won.
Yeah.
So the enemy's here, and they've taken out way more of us than we have of them without ever firing a bullet.
Yeah.
So what can we do to try to turn that around? That's the Veterans Talking to Veterans stuff. That's the Marcus Institute, Downrange Warriors Project alongside. There's plenty of out there with the work you're doing. So my next fundraiser I'm putting on, I'm stepping it up. Like I feel like I'm in a good place now. I can step it up and go talk to these bigger donors and whatnot and tell my story. So I'm putting on what's called the Knuckle Dragger. So we're a bunch of grunts, knuckle draggers. And I like the outdoors. I like challenges. I like adventure. So we're going to start here in my town and in Pinedale and ride our bikes 50 miles to the upper Green River Valley to the head of the Green River, which is one of the big tributaries in the Colorado. Headwaters for the Green River, which turns into wilderness boundary. Now you have to hike. There's no mechanical anything in wilderness. So we'll start at 7,000 feet biking, end up at 8,500 feet, and then start hiking. And we'll be on the Continental Divide Trail, pass over 11,000 feet over glaciers. And in the Wind River Range is where we'll be. In that range, there are thousands of glacier-fed lakes. Glaciers are massive glaciers up there. And so if we come across a lake that's on the trail, we're going to swim the lakes. So it's hike and swim, 35 miles of hiking. Will be 3,000 yards total of swimming if we do all the lakes I'm thinking of doing. And then there'll be 2 days in the winds, come back out at 9,500 feet. Our bikes will be waiting for us, and we'll ride back down into town in time for the Rendezvous Festival Parade. It's a big festival here in the community, where we'll then, this group of vets and first responders that just did this 3-day knuckle dragger suckfest are going to walk through the parade and just get more eyeballs on what we're talking about, the suicide rates. Yeah. And it's 44 a day is what we're up to.
Yeah.
It's 22 a day. It does not count the substance abuse, the overdose.
Yeah.
They don't add that in there because they're like, well, they're prescribed pills that maybe they just took too many pills by accident. They don't count that number. It's literally 44 vets a day are killing themselves. So I'm trying to accomplish 3 things with this fundraiser. Share that message about the numbers, raise the money, and then bring together a group of vets that, yeah, we're all broken and mentally disabled. Well, that too. Mentally and physically disabled, broken vets, but we can still plan the mission, train for the mission, and go out and accomplish the mission.
Yeah.
And that builds that brotherhood camaraderie thing, that those bonds will never break. When you suck like that for 3 days, you'll be friends forever.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to have everybody wearing a GoPro. I'm going to have a couple of my friends that are endurance athletes that are going to come with us and kind of video, record it, and interview us throughout the time. Hand all that footage over to an editor and turn it into a story. And whoever I can get to sponsor it, I want to shoot for like veteran-owned apparel companies.
Yeah.
Outdoor companies type thing. Veteran-owned businesses.
And there's a couple of different organizations in Montana too, or Wyoming, one of the two. I'm sure a variety, but they're all like outdoor companies too.
Yeah, a lot in Colorado too, but they're moving to Wyoming for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
So then have whoever sponsor this video and put it out on all the social media platforms to say, here's these group of guys and gals that they're not done yet. Mm-hmm. Here's a story of resilience and overcoming the odds and pushing through, and just, so get out there, get in your backyards, get your tribe together, your people together, and go do something challenging.
I love that.
So that's the 3-prong approach to my concept of the knuckle dragger.
It's
so yeah,
like triathlon, but next level.
Well, it's not a race. We're just going to go out and do it. It is. But yeah, it's not like we got to be back in 3 days. It's going to be like, okay, if we don't make it back, we don't make it back. I'm not going to kill ourselves trying to do this. But I've done tons of search and rescue operations in that Wind River Range. So I've seen the beauty of this place. It is spectacular. I mean, it is incredible for this place. So I get to take this group through this incredible landscape, and they get to see it while they're doing this thing that they get to raise money to help their brothers and sisters. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I think it's super needed too, because it's just like, finding new purpose outside of the military is already its own thing. And so like redefining what that purpose is, or like what brings life, back into you. And for some people, like it is beneficial. Like I hear so many times just in general from like people that I've talked to, like getting themselves involved in different activities like sports or challenges and things like that, like has been their new focus, instead of like, oh, well, my job isn't as needed, or like, like different things like that, coming from the military where everyone puts us on this like platform. And so then you leave the military, you're like, oh no, I'm not special anymore. And so finding these other ways to bring back that, either like you mentioned, that camaraderie, because I mean, I work for myself and I don't talk to people very much except for like the periodic podcast call or like periodic, client call, which I like, but it's also like, oh man, like it was nice having all that, like embracing the suck together kind of people around.
There's something there, like we're saying, there's a reason we can have this conversation, because we just have this understanding of each other. It's just automatic. You don't have to go through the getting to know each other and your background and your history. It's like, oh, you served? Yeah, cool, right on. Yeah. And then bam, it just starts from there. But So yeah, the suckfest thing is real. But that what you just said is exactly what Veterans Talking to Veterans is all about. It's giving them that space to come together once a week to hang out and shoot the shit and being amongst the like-minded people and knowing they're still out there.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking about, you said purpose outside the military. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. And this is one of the messages I kind of want to share with the knuckle dragger is don't let the military define you.
Mm-hmm.
Like I see a lot of guys that do all the podcast stuff and the videos and whatnot. And it's all their story of the military. It's all, it's military, special operations, Navy SEAL, everything, blah, blah. And I mean, they did some incredible stuff. That's great, but don't stay there.
Yeah.
Don't get stuck in that. What's next?
Yeah.
Like, what is your next thing you're going to do to continue to live your life? Don't think that this time in uniform, and same thing with any uniform personnel, doesn't matter. EMT, fire, doesn't matter. Don't let that time in uniform like lock you down to that 20-year time span of your 80-year life. It's just a quarter of your life. So what's next? What are you doing next for you and your family to lead your family, to lead yourself and your community? Don't get stuck in that block of time. Move on, move forward past it. That's the story. I got to start writing this down so I can kind of get the narrative in my head of how to tell that part. I'm just starting to think about it, and this is the first time I talked about it out loud. But I'm sure you know what I'm getting at. I'm hoping I get it.
No, I think it's good because I mean, it's like back in my day, like this is what I did. I was like, okay, but now what? Like that was 40 years ago, Grandpa. Like get over it. Like, what are you doing now? And no, it's true. Like, I mean, you can see the difference too, because eventually you're like, oh wow, like I spent all that time like not doing anything new or finding new experiences, and you can definitely tell the difference in just individuals and like their overall happiness too, even if they did like an amazing crazy career in the military, but like finding that new path to go down, even if it's working with the nonprofit, it doesn't have to be like a career aspect. I think it's helpful. And like we have so many opportunities out there for veterans that are just kind of waiting for us to come across them, but if we're not looking. But yeah, and I think that's like even for me coming from the medical field, because I'm like, oh, but like I didn't see things or I didn't experience this, and so there was always like this like
Stigma.
they had like, oh, but I didn't do what I was supposed to do, and now I'm a civilian again, kind of sort of thing. And but then it's like, no, but like I do all these other things, and like I've experienced this, and these are the projects that I'm working towards. Yeah, I think it's good to talk about like what has happened or like how it's impacted you, or like you're mentioning with like the podcast where it's like that's their identity. Like that's fine and it's helpful, but then like expanding from that, like now, like you were saying, like now what, like there's the world is your oyster still.
Yep, there's so much more you can do, and that's what's cool about the design of the VTV meetings is we don't talk about military service. Yeah, the conversations kind of stem from that, but we talk more about everyday stuff, the morals and values, ethics, relationships, all that everyday life stuff. We don't focus on the past. And so it kind of gives them, like I keep saying, the coach's job is to get them on that right path and keep them moving forward. And so that's our goal. And you see it happen. It's pretty cool to watch. So what about you? What are you doing now to start getting on your story going?
A lot of things, and I know I've shared it a little bit on like the podcast here and there. Also, I will say, like, I know something you mentioned earlier was like, it's been a process and like figuring it out. And then, like, how do I want to talk about it and all of that. So in 2020, yeah, end of 2020, I decided to work on my master's degree, to work towards like mental health and counseling and things like that. But then 3 months later, I was too triggered by like as I was writing papers, I'd have flashbacks to like my marriage and things like that. And I was like, okay, apparently I didn't work through that, because now I'm back to falling asleep all day and like all these things. And I was like, Okay, and like a lot of anxiety to work on my papers because I want to learn about these topics and I want to do them, but I needed to work on things. And so I started my master's in 2020, and it's only a 2.5 year program. And I am here in 2025 still working on a master's degree because I've had to take pauses or like um I'm a mom. I work for myself, which has been anywhere from part-time to full-time just because balancing life is a lot. But in 2021, like I ended up working on a book about my late marriage, and I'm not going to say it was like the world's best book in the world, like amazing, but it was a series of flashbacks, and so it was just like me working through like me getting to Fort Campbell, me meeting my late husband, the struggles in that relationship, and like I've had people, like one of my friends is like a writer and editor, and she's like, well, you got to add more like details. Like, I don't have any more detail. That is all I remember, kind of sort of thing. But I wrote a book about my late marriage, and I've had a couple of people actually be like, no, that saved me, or like I needed that. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, I'm glad it helped. Because I was like, I just kind of wrote it and then spiraled into an abyss because I wasn't working with a therapist or a counselor or anybody. I just sat down and for 4 months straight just wrote about my trauma, and then like stayed in there, and I was like, I can't, like, couldn't figure out how to get out, kind of sort of thing. I think also I underestimated, like, I was like, no, it wasn't that bad. Like there, and then like as I write something, this other memory popped back up, or this other thing came back up, and you're like, yeah, that actually did suck really bad. Never mind. But then you're already in it. But yeah, so I wrote that and then spiraled into an abyss, like depersonalization, derealization, existential, everything, just a hot anxiety mess. And
That's
like,
good.
what is life?
That's as long as on a t-shirt.
And so I ended up doing what I do best. I moved to another state. I tell people I'm like a nomad, but also like sometimes I'm just like, no, I need a new military maybe contributes to that. I don't know. But I moved out to Chattanooga because I was like, there's all this outdoor stuff like within 30 minutes of me. Because at the time I was still living back in Arizona, and there's tons of outdoor things to do in Arizona, but I needed greenery and I needed this and this and that. And so I actually had moved out to Chattanooga in 2022, and I stayed there for about 2 years. And I just really like when I say like I was non-existent, like I was a mom and I like kind of worked, but I was like barely getting by. And I just focused on going for walks every day and getting back in touch with reality and the present. And so it was like, okay, let me, like, what birds are out today? What are like what trees and like flowers, and like literally that whole year was just getting back to nature and being in real life and not whatever was going on in my head of existentialism. And yeah. And so that was the other year. And then now I'm like in a better state, like just for my business alone. And I'm back in a master's program again and working towards that. And my longer term goal is like to do equine therapy and animal therapy, because yes, and like EMDR is another one that I'm really interested in. I haven't ever done it as myself, but I've like listened to like instructor sides, like from the psychology, like the provider side of it. Um, so like some of those longer term goals are that. But like I haven't really published or marketed my book. So I'm like, it's okay. Like I wrote it in 2021, and I still like maybe periodically will be like, oh yeah, like I did this thing and I wrote about this. And even with this podcast, I've really let myself like allow it to grow as I needed to. There are phases where I was like, no, like talking about grief and having people on to talk about grief, even if it is a gold side of like how we've come and healed and worked through it, it's still heavy. And so like I've even had to like, I'd start and then I'd pause. And so I think there's like this reminder that there's a process, just like healing and trauma and working through all of that. It's a process. It's not going to be like 3 weeks and done and now you're healed forever. It's like, yeah, this was good. This is great tools and resources that I got to carry with me now when things might come up. And so that's kind of like where I'm at now. Is like, I'm like, okay, I'm on this good trajectory. I have to keep in mind, like my end goal is like getting more people on my podcast and sharing people's stories, and eventually having my own practice where I can offer things, and maybe getting involved in the veterans to veterans conversations. Because I'll be out in Arizona starting this summer time frame. So right now we're in Washington. But yeah, I think that's kind of like, I'm just in the process of figuring it out. And I'm 32. Like, I'm still figuring it out. My son's 10, so I have more freedom now to like figure out what I want to be when I grow up. And actually, one of my favorite things to ask people who are older is like, do you ever figure it out? They're like, no, we're just here for the ride. Like, I was like, okay.
Well, obviously you're aware of how the creative process is a big part of healing.
Yeah.
That's you writing your book was a big part of it. The stories you're telling, you're able to get it out.
Yeah.
And the podcast, definitely in the photography. But if you're able to draw a trend line of your productivity in relation to your work on yourself, what would that line be doing?
I think it's been all over the place. I
But if
will
you-
say definitely, even just like with like, I grieved like father of my child first kind of sort of thing. Like, and if people haven't heard this, like you'll have to listen to other podcasts where I talk about my story, but I grieved father of my child. And then 1 year, or this is around when I was starting to work on my book, my friend was like, you don't call him your late husband. You call him like your former, like it was something where I detached myself essentially. And like that one shift of wording, I was like, oh crap, like you're right. Like I never grieved like that relationship as me. And so
words matter.
yes.
Truly
And so
matter.
it was like just one shift of wording, and I was like, oh shoot, you're right. I think productivity and working on myself has honestly kind of gone hand in hand since like 2021. Before, like I was going through and I was productive, and I was doing wedding photography, and I was like the most successful year. So I was productive, but I was not working on myself at all. I was just had a great career and I was just like avoid
You,
all problems.
you buried it.
Yeah. And so, but since opening, I feel like my productivity has like aligned with the healing, because like now I'm taking better care of myself and like being able to focus more, and like money has helped me get myself more involved in different things that help me get healing and working on stuff. Yeah, so I would say it's been both, where like productivity and healing were not at all the same, and then now it's they're kind of together. So like as I get to talk to people, I get to notice things, and mirroring is a huge thing where like you can see, and I think that's part of like that mythology story, is like we can see a part of ourselves in like any story that's told. And so I think that's been really fascinating, just from having people as guests, even if they're in completely different walks of life, just being able to sit and listen and then be like, oh wow, like yeah, like I feel that, or this and this relates to that. And so yeah, I think the productivity and healing, now that I've like opened the box, has been aligned, but you have to open the box first.
Do you realize how self-aware you are?
I'm too self-aware.
Okay. Well, that's good, because most people aren't. Most people try to, though they don't want to be aware.
Yeah.
They try to hide it and bury it. So no, that's good. I think you're on a great path, a great journey.
Thank you.
I'll just keep doing what you're doing. And I wrote down this question. So who did your book help?
Me eventually, but and I'm not going to name names, but I've had like just people reach out and be like, hey, like some people were like, I was in tears. I had no idea you went through all of that. I was like, yeah, I put a pretty smile on and pretended life was fine. That's why you didn't know I went through any of that. So I think in some ways it was, friends like, oh, wow, like now I get it kind of sort of thing. I've had random people who I didn't know, but their spouse was in a program, and they messaged me and like, hey, I read your book and I feel so seen. Like I literally had to like come and take care of this for my husband because of like his mental health. So it's been interesting, because like as much as I don't want to identify as a military spouse, so I was like, I was a veteran, like, and then I also don't align with military at all. I'm like, no, I don't, like, unless people ask, I don't like to bring it up at all. So I'm in like all of those holes where I'm like, no, I am a veteran, but also like, I guess technically, yeah, I am a military spouse, and like, all of that. And then the mental health aspect. And so I will say, like, the thing that I've liked from hearing from people is that I am getting all the sides. They're like, oh, I never thought of that from like a mental health perspective, or oh, I never thought about my spouse's side of the military story. And then so it's been really like, from the few people who have read and left me reviews, I think that's the other hard thing, is like people don't like to read about trauma. And so like I've had a lot of people buy my book as support, but then they're like, I probably won't ever read it. I was like, that's okay. If you read it, let me know. But yeah, I think the most rewarding thing, or like, you know, people it's impacted, is like all the different sides of the story. And I think that's been nice for me to get to see too, because I'm like, oh, I guess I can, you know, share all three sides. And that's not something a lot of people get to do. Not that I would wish somebody to have to write a story like that, but it's nice to be able to be like, no, I get the veteran side. I get why he was probably this way. But also, I'm the spouse too. And this is what I was seeing and what I was dealing with. And so, yeah, I think it's been good.
The spouses, in my opinion, are the biggest underserved part of our community.
Yeah.
They took on 20 years of war. We were coming home after 6, 12, 15 months deployments. Who do you think took on that burden? It was
Yeah.
the spouse. I mean, I saw it in my wife. I saw it in my friends' wives. And these women are still there today. I mean, they're incredible women, and they don't get the credit they deserve. Now they're moms, or some of them are grandmas now, and they're still kicking ass and taking names, but they haven't dealt with their side of the trauma yet.
Yeah.
So it's starting to show. So with your story, do you realize how much you can relate to the spouses, whether they're my generation, your generation, younger? Do you realize what you can do for them?
I think I'm starting to. So, again, for example, like with my working on healing, I didn't even reach. So, there's the Gary Sinise Foundation has the Snowball Express.
Oh, what? Real quick, that is one of the major funders of the Marcus
Oh,
Institute. Yeah,
yeah. I
keep
love
going. I
that.
just want to plug that.
But it took me a while because I was like, yeah, but like we were separated. Yeah, but like, you know, like it's all these like excuses for why I don't qualify as the military spouse kind of sort of thing.
I can relate. I know exactly how you feel. It's excuses or justifications.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
got you.
And but then like we went to our first event, and like I was like, oh, actually, I have a lot in common with these spouses who were with their husband for 5, 10, you know, however many years. And so there's that. And then obviously, like my son, regardless of how old he was, like he will get to relate to these kids. But I think that's been me having to acknowledge that, like, okay, I was a military spouse too. And I think it's like you said, like they don't get enough credit. Our mutual Monica, which I've had her on the podcast as well, I loved her story because I didn't realize, like, yes, spouses, like you're like, oh yeah, you give up things, but I'm like, no, these women had full-on careers, and they're like, all right, well, I guess I'm a mom now. Or like, you know, now I have to find a new identity because I'm following you around, and I can't keep doing this with my job. And so like getting to find these stories is
It's a whole
amazing.
other form of sacrifice that
Yeah.
people need to realize that they really do. And your story in particular, unfortunately, can relate to a lot. There's majority of people come into the military because of the what is it that the childhood trauma essentially.
Hmm.
They come to the military because they find that structure and that family, and that trauma comes with them. And then you go to war, and that just piles on top. And then you
Yes.
hit 40, 45, and it's like, oh shit, I'm a mess. I got to do something about this.
Yeah.
So with your story and your on a your path of healing happened much sooner than most, sooner. So your awareness of your situation, your path that you're on, and your ability to communicate are also major assets that you have that I hope you put to work. I mean,
Yeah.
you are. I should you are. I hope you
For a long time, it was just hidden in a box.
Yeah, and I know. Same here. Until literally just a year or
Yeah.
two ago, and I hope that you amplify the work you're doing, and because I see it every day. I see what's going on with the spouses and the military and the women vets. It's talk to anybody that knows me in the last 6 months to a year, and they'll all say, "Yeah, Kris talks a lot about the spouses and the women vets. Like he wants to do something to help them because they're the underserved one. Everybody knows that the men went through whatever, but what about women that served? And what about the spouses that were at home, like you said, completely dropped everything
Yeah.
to deal with? Like, so when my friends were killed, my teammates were killed, they shut down all communications. Last thing my wife knew was I was coming home, and this is my guys that we were always together in the same truck. So, quickly the word gets around to the spouses that Ryan's dead, and they know two other ones are dead. They just don't know who it is yet. And so the spouses start calling each other. And then so my wife is like, holy shit, that's Kris's team. And there's two other guys dead. So for like 3 days, she thought I was dead. And she was calling chaplains. She was calling base commanders. She was calling, can you tell me anything? Can you just tell me if my husband's still alive? Can you no, man, we can't tell you anything. So that trauma affected her bad. I remember, and this is part of my guilt and shame. Have you gotten into moral injury yet?
Probably yes. I
We're
think it's
gonna
more
have
like
to,
when it's explained, I'm like, yeah, totally, I get that.
we'll have to do a whole other conversation about moral injury. It's just starting to crack the surface. So think about it. Your morals were injured.
Yeah.
Your values were damaged. You were given an order to kill that guy, but he didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
And then it's like I'd explained this last night. So before 9/11, I was working in Detroit with a bunch of black dudes who were Muslims. They were awesome people. And I was like, this Muslim stuff is kind of cool. I want to learn more about this. This whole other religion I've never heard of. 2 years later, 9/11, now everybody hates Muslims. I go over to Iraq. Everybody's my enemy. Everybody's taken prisoner and torturing them and doing terrible things. And that's the moral injury is they didn't, I was ordered to do that. I was like gaslit into believing they were my enemy, but we were doing the same thing here if they invaded our country. So anyways, we'll get back to the moral injury thing in a different conversation, but crap, where's I going with this? With the women.
And the spouse side and like.
Yeah, with my wife.
Yeah.
Yes. So my wife took on a lot of the trauma from my guys being killed because she thought I was dead for 3 days. And so then I come home and I'm just a complete shell for 6 months to a year. There's no emotion whatsoever. There's nothing. I'm just empty. And so anyways, I remember finishing the memorial service, where we go to the church and we do the 21 gun salute and we call out the names and nobody answers. And everybody just leaves the church to go outside to do the next thing. And I'm up in the front because I have to deal with everything. And I remember looking back and my wife had her face in her hands all alone. She was the only one in this giant church. I remember going, why are you upset? This wasn't your friends. Why are you upset?
Yeah.
Whatever. And I walked out like, I don't have time to deal with you right now. That's another moral injury thing. But now looking back today, it was like, oh yeah, that was pretty jacked up what I did there. That was terrible what I did. And then put myself in her shoes. Yeah, you thought I was dead. And then they were her friends too. Mm-hmm. She knew all those guys before we deployed. We were that family that everybody came over to hang out with and party with, watch the UFC fights. So yeah, that's part of that trauma that the spouses have taken on. Or let's say that happened 6 months earlier and I don't come home, I'm still deployed, but who has to deal with the memorial services? Yeah. Who has to see the families when I'm still fighting? My mind's, like you said earlier, my mind's still in the fight. I'm not home dealing with assholes on the streets like a cop would be. That's the spouses that are doing all that work with the bodies and everything and the families. That happened, like I said, 7,057 times across the country. And no one has thought about that when it comes to the spouses.
It's true.
I shouldn't say no one. It's just not being.
It's not the highlight.
Yeah.
Getting shared.
So yeah, with your story, you can hit all those things I just mentioned. Yeah. You can relate to every one of those.
It's true. And it's like, and I know we're definitely going to go over time. I'm like, if things are longer, I'll just cut it into 2 parts if I feel like there are 2 sides of the story going on. But no, I see it too, like, now that I am seeing more of the military, because, as a veteran or when you're in the military, you're like, oh, the military spouses and they take the identities and there's all this like stigma around military spouses that are joked about and they know it too. They've heard them. But then just because of my circle, like me helping with Spousely and like, getting to meet the different vendors, like then like things show up at my feet. I'm like, oh yeah, like they really do. They have it going a lot. Like there's like the whole like Murphy and they're like, there was one reel I just saw on like Instagram the other day where the husband's deployed and he's like, I hope you guys are having like, this great time and like their water pipe burst. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And
In the
it's just
meantime,
like raising a dog, like I think it was like a 2-year-old girl while like their house is flooding and her husband's like thinks things are fine and like, and she's over here figuring it out. And so it's just like, yeah, just like all the different things that they have to have on their plates to figure
yeah,
it out. But
yeah.
yeah.
They don't realize how tough the women are back home dealing with it. And like my friend, I shouldn't say his name, but he retired out of the 160th Special Operations Air helicopter
Hmm.
stuff. So this guy's got a hell of a career. It's cool to hear his story. So he came in, I think he came in as a guardsman, a reservist or something, as like, I think a Humvee mechanic, I think. And then went OCS, infantry officer, Ranger school, and then came to us in the infantry world to start his command before the invasion of Iraq. Outstanding leader, and did the Iraq invasion together, and we just became friends. Similar personalities off the field, so we had a good time outside of work. He went on to go. He was uh, OIC for Ranger School at Mountain Phase back in the day, and then he's ready to do something else. So he wanted to become a helicopter pilot. So he had to like literally, I think, leave the army for like an hour, and then come back in. I think General Petraeus got involved in this somehow. Drop his commission, become a warrant officer, go to walk school and flight school. First did the Kiowa program, and then he dropped the Kiowa, and then flew Apaches and didn't like that. And then he's like, well, I'm going to go try out for 160th. And so he gets into one. I shouldn't get too into detail, but he then does some of that secret squirrel stuff those guys do and did some
Yeah.
cool stuff. And then he was done. No. So yeah, sorry. So he in Iraq invasion, and then with the 101st Kiowa pilot, he escorted the last 1st unit out of Iraq when they pulled out, and then goes 160th, and then he's getting ready to retire, and so they blackline those guys in the calendar. And there's not many of those pilots that what he did. I mean, less than 50 of those guys in the army at once. And then the job he did, there's like less than a dozen probably. So Afghanistan was falling, and they have to go in and start doing hostage rescues and getting our people out of the wire, bringing them to Bagram, try to get him to save them, because you saw the pictures, everybody falling off the planes and stuff,
Hmm.
coming over the wire. So he's on a 240 machine gun on the second perimeter security line when the gate blows and the 17 service members were killed and hundreds of Afghans.
Yeah.
He was on a machine gun when that happened. As a pilot, he's pulling security, and then he is literally loading up his backpack as the Taliban is coming through the bear base. The Taliban is 50 yards away from his hangar. He showed me a picture, and he's on the second to last plane to leave Afghanistan.
Mhm.
That is his career.
That's so wild.
Yeah, and his wife was with him from college all the way through, and the kids and everything. Beautiful family, beautiful life. I mean, they're really a spectacular family. But that's a lot, and that woman raised that family while he was doing all that.
Yes.
But he totally realizes it's like, okay, no, I did my time, I did my thing. Now it's your guys' turn to.
And I can't remember what the name is right now. But I came across them and I need to reach back out because I was supposed to come on as a guest at one point. But then they had a bunch of stuff going on. Her husband, and I think I just saw there's like a new Ranger documentary on Netflix, and I was like, I know that guy. I've talked to him and his wife. So I was like, that's wild. I've never seen somebody on the TV like that. But him and his wife started their own. It's for like the special operations in general families, but it's like partially for the wives and for the couples. And I'm like, that's so needed. And because like basically the husband, I don't know his whole life path, but he was in Delta Force and then did other stuff too. And then he ended up eventually working on healing. And then the wife was like, yeah, but like, I don't like, what do you mean I have PTS? Like, what do you mean I do? Like, and like, she went through all these different treatments and she's like, what is this? She's like, they're like, you take on the secondhand trauma. Like you take on these different things too. And so, I really like their platform, and I'll have to like add it into the show notes because I can't remember for the life of me. I know it's a V, and then there's like a woman on it, but then they also have a different brand that's for the couples and couples retreats to like work on stuff together. But I thought that was really powerful to be like, even the spouse is like, oh, I didn't know I carried all of that, and so
My wife's been in therapy for a couple of years.
yeah.
Yeah. And it took, everybody has to hit rock bottom before
Yeah.
their rock bottom, I shouldn't say, not rock bottom, but a bottom, to go, okay, it's time. I got to do something about this.
Mhm.
And she finally, I saw it coming. And it finally, but you can't force them. You
Yeah.
have to just be there with them and go walk the trail with them. And so I was just walking the trail with her, and finally I'm like, I think it's coming. And it came pretty quick. And then I was like, and so I went through my treatment program, the Marcus Institute. And then after that, she was like, okay, I think I needed, it's my time. I was like, okay, here we go. Let's do it. Let's take care of you now.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and you realize it's just layer upon layer upon layer upon layer. And you have to just start, it's like an onion. You just got to start
Mhm.
peeling away and getting to work. And it never really ends. Like I try to tell these guys that I'm starting to get into the special operations community, and it's definitely locked up, but they seem to take good care of themselves. But the infantry guys, I mean, there's tens and tens of thousands of us, and we're just kind of the cannon fodder that gets thrown out there. And
Yeah.
we're doing a lot of the same stuff as the special operations guys, and we're kind of like forgotten about. So trying to get into that community next, the infantry dudes, the combat engineers, the artillery guys that were on the ground, MPs that were on the ground, kicking doors in and doing that stuff and getting blown up, driving around Iraq, to get them to start talking and doing their thing. But what, in my opinion, completely unprofessional, you helped me out here. Um, you have to get in and do the work, the hard work,
Mhm.
cognitive stuff, the behavioral stuff, whatever it is. You got to get in there and do the repair work,
Yeah.
and then get that at a good point, and then it's maintenance from here on out.
Yeah.
Mighty Oaks is what came to mind when you talked about the ranger guy and the spouses and stuff.
Mhm.
That's another good one that does a lot with families, military families. So Mighty Oaks would like maintenance, veterans talking to veterans is maintenance. Downrange warriors up here, all these other ones that are, there's tens of thousands of them. You have to do the maintenance, or else you're going to slip back in. And I've recently tapped into a few special operations guys, and I'm trying to tell them the same thing. You got to get in and do the work.
Yeah.
You got to do the work, man.
When you mentioned the infantry versus the SF, so like I'm now seeing somebody and he was in the Rangers, and I had asked him and he's like, well, a lot of us don't deal with like PTSD or PTS as much as the regular people do because our stuff changed. Like we had a different mission, different night, everything. These guys are on that same patrol the same day, the next day, after the explosion, and so he's like, we have different experiences, and that's why. Plus, they have like better support and systems in place just in the special operations field in general. But he was like, no, I think that's like, he's like, yeah, we deployed 7, 8, 10, 12 times compared to the 12-month that they had. But like our circumstances were very different. Our missions were really different. The repetitiveness that they got is a lot of what ends up being that, like, because you're like, oh, that road had an IED the last time, like, is it gonna have another one this time? Like there's a lot of things that happen where he's like, no, we were at a different house, a different night, different place, different things, like we weren't repeatedly coming back to the same place. And he's like, I think that's a huge part of why we don't see it as much in our field, plus the support that they have. But I thought that was an interesting conversation because I was like, oh, I never would have thought about, same like we mentioned about the police force and firefighters. It's like you're repeatedly seeing that house, that road, that thing, and being able to work on that. But I think, and I had just had a guest on because I had talked about like I want to work on my accountability coaching and stuff like that more. And he had asked me like where, like in the grief process or different things like that, like would you say people should work on it? I was like, when they're ready, because it won't benefit you. So it's the same with counseling. It's like, in the military where people were like, oh well, I had to go, I was for mandatory counseling, and they're like, it doesn't matter because if they're not ready for it, they're not gonna take anything from it. And so I think I don't know where the middle ground is of the awareness to get people more interested. I think,
You said it.
yeah,
They have to be ready.
yeah,
But you have to just be there when they're ready.
yeah,
So that's like what you're doing with the VTV type stuff, is that weekly presence of knowing, hey, there's other people out there. I'm not alone. And then you find these people, if there's 20 people in this meeting, and that's a big number. If there's 10 people in this meeting and 3, 4, 5 of us have worked on ourselves and we're in a good place. Now we're the example that they can come to and say, hey, I'm ready. What do you think I should do? What should I recommend? What's happening now is the spouses call me. I heard your story. I heard what happened. Can you please help my husband? He is like, nothing I can do until he's ready. As long as he's coming to the meetings, that's great. But that's what matters. He's taking the steps. He's showing up. And when he's ready, we'll be there. It's not support. It's just like, here, man, call this number. Get online and do this. And then I'll help you along the way. I'll keep in touch while you're doing it. And then, bam, now we can relate because we've both been through the same type of treatment. Yeah. And now we're both on the same page. And you could go on and help 10 other people. It's on them. It really is. Like you said, so the Ranger dude you're dating, like their story's similar but different. Mm-hmm. An infantry guy that was deployed to Afghanistan is going to be different than an infantry guy deployed to Iraq.
Yeah.
A combat medic that was with me that had to patch a bunch of holes might not have been different, would be different than someone that got just a bunch of IEDs stuff. Like Afghanistan was more of a gunfight world, where Iraq was more IEDs and different types of trauma. Yeah, but it's all the same. And the law enforcement guys, the EMT, I mean, okay, so you're driving on the road and your friends get blown up and you got to put tourniquets on arms and legs. How's it any different than an EMT that shows up to a car?
Yeah, I have friends who they never served in the military, but I was like, I don't know, their paramedic stories are wild. Like they're like the things that they've had to come into or like walk into.
These law enforcement guys that had to rush to the scene of dead babies in cribs. I mean, that will never go away.
Yeah. And then I didn't realize, and like I was like, well, no, duh. Like I guess I should have realized that, but like military or the police and whoever, like they're the ones who have to go knock on the door and let that family know that their spouse, child, whoever is like passed and or died from this incident. And military, like yeah, they're deployed. This might happen, but like a random stranger on the street, coming and telling you that this person just in their daily life had this happen. And I'm like, I was like, I guess I knew that somebody has to come tell people, but I never, it was something that just never really crossed my mind. And I was like, that's like another added layer of like, great, not only do we have to deal with this, but now we have to go and handle the grieving, like very unplanned for, experience for that family.
And then think about that veteran that did 10 years in the Army Marines and then got out and now he's a firefighter or a cop.
Yeah.
And he's 45, 50 years old, 30 years of this. And they're probably a divorce or two in.
Yeah.
And then just a wreck, total wreck. And then it's like, okay, you're 55, you're done, you're retired, have a nice life. And you wonder why the suicides are so high. And that's the thing we got to start doing is these law enforcement, especially here in Wyoming, some of these law enforcement community or groups are so locked up so tight. They won't allow anybody in. It's a whole tough guy cowboy routine. Mm-hmm. And you just cowboy through it. And it's like, this is not going to end well, man. Look at history. This does not end well for you. And you've got to start doing the work now. So when the time comes, like we were talking about earlier, what's your new purpose? What's the next you? Like you're not stuck in this old ID. You've created a new life for yourself.
Yeah.
Whatever that may be.
I've heard that even like a friend, like I said, like I have friends who are like in the EMS field or EMS attached to firefighters. And she's like, I had this person on as like my practice for like a counseling thing that I needed to do. And I was like, oh my God, they're the military. Like it's very like from the mentality of like, oh yeah, we went through all this stuff, but like, we don't need help. We're fine. We don't need to talk about it. And I was just like, oh, we are very the same, just different roles in this world. And I think, I don't know, maybe we need a new PR team for therapy counseling, like somebody to remarket, rebrand it. And like,
well, and this is, I think, like, again, we could have a lot of conversation about this. The getting a better understanding of moral injury and post-traumatic growth.
Yeah.
Getting away, it's not PTSD. It's not a disorder.
Yeah.
Post-traumatic stress is not a disorder. This has been going on since monkeys were in trees throwing shit at each other. This is no different than what we're doing today.
Yeah.
We just have nuclear weapons now. So trauma and war and conflict has been around since humans have been around. How do we deal with this? And how do we grow from it? So it's not a disorder. This is when you have trauma and you have these triggering memories or these things that bring up these thoughts, this is part of the brain's survival mechanism. So if you're an EMT and the first time you walk onto a car crash scene and you're putting your gloves on, your hands are probably shaking so bad you can't put your gloves on. Or the first time you stack on a door as a cop or an infantryman, you're like, what am I doing? Where am I going? What am I supposed to be doing? If I left, right, center, what do I?
Yeah.
But yet the EMT shows up to their third or fourth car wreck, and now they're putting their gloves on, they're getting the tourniquet ready, they already know what they're going to do. That's because the trauma has set in, and that's their survival mechanism. This is the brain saying, okay, I know what I'm supposed to do here to keep my body, the anxiety down, the heart rate down, to be able to function through this traumatic situation and stay alive for the next traumatic situation I have to come in contact with. But we have to understand that this is normal. And for those of you that were in the medical field or an EMT that's on the ground doing this work every day, you have to process the trauma. You cannot allow it to stay in the mind. Process through it, go to the therapy, do the work. I shouldn't say therapy. Go do the work, literally. No, it should be part of their job to go do this work. Take a couple days, go talk to someone, go do the physical thing, the yoga practice, the gym, whatever, and do the work to process the trauma so that the next time you have to go do this, you can do your job. And then you retire at 55, 60, you're not a freaking basket case. And you have 25, 30 years of law enforcement service or plugging holes of wounds on the side of the road that you can then live your life and go on and function. And you're not suicidal. You're not an alcoholic. You're not looking for the next pill. Or you're not going home and beating up your family or the dog or something.
Yeah.
And that's what needs to change.
Yeah. And I think, just like looking at it, I think a lot of the issues and the stigma is like, well, how does it make you feel? How does this, like just the ways that people assume therapy has to be or counseling needs to be. And there are so many different ways to work through things now. Like I always tell people, I'm like, EMDR. I'm not saying that's like the band-aid for or like the fixer for everybody, but I know
something.
Yeah. Or like, just some things like for me, like I did talk therapy here and there, but like what really helped me was just being present again. Cause I am like, sometimes I'm like so self-aware and I'm like, yeah, blah, 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 blah. They're like, wow, like you really know all the steps. I'm like, yeah. But that like feeling it and sitting there and like being present is like like I did equine therapy and I remember like the coach was like, why can't you look at the horse? I was like, I'm uncomfortable. I don't like it. Like, I don't want to be vulnerable and look at this horse. And so I'm just like petting it. And she was like, yeah, like, he kept trying to look back to you, like make eye contact or connect with you. And you just did not want to. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. It's just not comfortable. And
I couldn't either.
It's just,
go.
So like being able to do those different things.
My wife has a horse in their property. I don't go near it.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, and like when you go out hunting and stuff, and they take pack trips, I walk. I don't go. When I see, I'm gonna share this so hopefully other people can connect. And please reach out to me if you do, because I've since connected with some people on this. So when I did the horse therapy thing at Marcus for a day, if I look in the horse's eyes, I see the fear because they're predatory animals. So I see the fear in their eyes, and it's the same look I see when I was doing stuff to people in Iraq. And so that's the triggering event that's like, I don't want to go anywhere near this animal because that look reminds me of the fear I put in other people's eyes, other humans' eyes that was, close enough to see it. And so the animal's looking at you like, whoa, are you a friend or a foe? Like, what are we doing here? And that's that thing that I'm like, I don't want to go anywhere near that. I'm good. But yeah. So on the horse therapy thing, I want to get you in touch with a couple people. Here in my town, they're starting up they're going to call it the Sanctuary. Ranch they're building for kind of teenage girls that have been through some crap. And they can come here. I think they're planning on having like 20-something therapists on staff and tons of horses. And I don't know how they're going to do this. I think they're way ahead of themselves, but hopefully it works itself out. So that it's a retreat. Sanctuary retreat for women to come, work with the horses, work with the therapists, do the work, and hopefully I'll get on a better path and eventually go into the sex trafficked women that have been brutalized and then grow from that. And then that at ease horsemanship, I'll have to get you in touch with them and see what you can do to help each other.
Yeah, I think it's helpful. And like I'm still learning about just like the whole the force that like makes like why equine. I think it's really interesting to learn about.
And the energy.
Yeah.
the energy of
And
a
then
horse.
yeah, like it said, it's like almost like we were talking like that mirror, and it's like they're throwing back almost like what you're feeling, and you're like, oh, okay. I guess that's what's sitting here. So it's interesting as I like learn more about it. But I know we have to start wrapping up. As much as I have loved the conversation, I could keep it going too. I think there's been a lot of really good points brought in and lots of good resources. I think the biggest thing, and I'll have you, leave your kind of quote or words of recommendations, advice, things like that. But I think the biggest takeaway from today is one, it's on you, the listener, whoever, to make that first step. And it doesn't mean you have to go all in. You can just sit and listen to whoever. You don't need to like unlock all your 20 years of experience or have words to put together to be able to make a step towards healing. And the biggest thing too is that the overall goal, if you go to the right people, is that you are provided with tools and resources to carry on moving forward. Like Kris said, it's going to be ongoing. There's going to be maintenance. Like even with me, like I still will find my spiral for like depersonalization that wants to come in and existentialism. And then I'm like, hold on. I remember like these are the things that helped me work through it last time. These are the things that can help me work through it again this time. But it generally doesn't always affect you the same depth as it used to because now you've had those onion layers peeling. So I guess kind of in closing, Kris, there's any little last words of advice and resources you'd like to quickly share?
Well, we'll definitely put the resources however you can
Yeah, I'll
find.
have them in the show notes and stuff like that. Yeah.
I don't know how that works, but I would just say, like you already commented on it, just you can't stay stuck. Whether it's your image, your identity, where you're at in your process, you got to keep moving forward. It's no different than if you're in an ambush or you get hit by an IED. What do? You keep push through it and you counterattack. You're firefight on a street. You don't sit there because you move left, right to the enemy, whatever. You got to keep moving. That's all I would say is keep moving. And then if there's one message I can get out there, it's that post-traumatic stress is not a disorder. It's literally a survival mechanism for the body.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining me and sharing a little bit about your story and your journey.
And likewise, yeah, it was cool getting to know you, and we got a lot of work to do.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining today's episode. If you have your own From Grief to Gold story, I would love to hear it and have you on as a guest. You can find more information at fromgrieftogold.com, and I also have the contact form and everything in the show notes. But it was such a great conversation. I feel like it was a longer one, but such a needed conversation for the military and first responder community. So I hope you were able to take something from this episode and are able to work towards a better future for yourself. Thanks so much. And be sure to check our other episodes as well.